So, I've always been the weird one in my family. You know, the black sheep and all that. I'm Ella Thompson, 29 years old now, but I felt like I don't fit in for pretty much forever. Growing up, I was the oldest kid of doctors Margaret and Robert Thompson. Yeah, my parents were big shots, but none of that good stuff ever really came my way. Nah, all the perks went to my younger twin brothers, Jack and Oliver. From the second those two popped out, it was like I became invisible to my parents. It started off small, you know? They'd get a bigger piece of cake or a new toy. But as we got older, it got way worse and super obvious. I remember when I turned 10. I'd been dropping hints for ages about this art set I saw in a shop window. Nothing crazy, just a basic kit with some decent paints and brushes. When my birthday rolled around, I was so pumped to open my one present, and what do I find? A freaking math workbook. When I hit my teenage years, the favoritism got even more in your face. Family trips were all about what the boys wanted. If Jack felt like skiing, boom, we're off to the slopes. If Oliver was into surfing that year, hello beach vacation. My ideas? Always got shot down or ignored. College applications. Man, that's a touchy subject. When I was 17, I fell in love with art restoration. I'd hang out at the local museum for hours, bugging the staff with questions about how they fixed up old art. When I brought up studying art restoration in college, you'd think I'd said I wanted to join the circus or something. Art restoration? Mom laughed. Ella, get real. That's not a proper job. Yeah, Ella, Jack butted in with this smug look. Why don't you do something useful, like become a doctor? I'll never forget how proud my parents looked when Jack said that. It was a look I'd never seen them give me. Even though they didn't have my back, I was determined to make it happen. When college acceptance letters started showing up, I was over the moon to find out I'd scored a scholarship to study art restoration. I remember running into the kitchen, waving the letter around like a crazy person. Mom, Dad, I got a scholarship. Mom barely looked up from her medical journal. That's nice, honey. Did you hear the boys got perfect scores on their sets? The day I left for college was so different from when the twins would leave 2 years later. I packed up my second-hand laptop and thrift store clothes, getting ready to take the bus to my not-so-fancy state school. My parents were too caught up in their work to even give me a ride to the bus station. But there was one person who actually saw me for who I was. My grandma, Elizabeth. She showed up that day, and right before I was about to leave, she pulled me aside. Ella, sweetie, she said, pushing a small envelope into my hand. I'm so proud of you. Don't ever forget that. Inside the envelope was a check, not enough to change my whole life, but enough to make things a bit easier. But more than the money, it was the fact that she actually noticed me that meant everything. So, college was kind of a mixed bag for me. On one hand, I was finally free from always being compared to Jack and Oliver. I could really dive into my studies without feeling like I was in some weird competition for attention. But on the other hand, money was tight. Like, really tight. While I was barely getting by on my scholarship and working part-time jobs, I'd hear about all the fancy stuff my brothers were up to through family calls and social media. Fancy frat parties, spring break trips to crazy places, internships at big-shot hospitals, all paid for by our parents, of course. Time went by, and I threw myself into my studies like crazy. Art restoration became more than just what I wanted to do for a job, it was my escape, my happy place. There was something really satisfying about bringing beauty back to old, forgotten pieces, about showing the hidden potential under layers of neglect and damage. In my last year, I scored an internship at this small but respected museum. It wasn't fancy work, mostly cleaning and organizing stuff, but it was a way in. I was over the moon. When I called home to share the news, my mother's response was exactly what I expected, lukewarm at best. Oh, that's nice, dear, she said, sounding distracted. Did you hear about Jack's research paper? It's being published in a major medical journal. I held back a sigh. That's great, Mom. Listen, I was thinking of coming home for a weekend soon. Maybe we could. Oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea, she cut me off quick. Your father and I are going to be really busy. We're helping the boys with their research papers. You understand, right? As I hung up the phone, I felt that familiar mix of anger and hurt building up in my chest. But this time, there was something else too. A little spark of defiance, of determination. I looked around my tiny dorm room, at the art books piled up on my desk, at the half-finished restoration project taking up most of my floor. This was my world now, one I had built for myself despite everything. Screw them, I muttered to the empty room. I don't need their approval. But even as I said it, a part of me knew it wasn't true. As much as I tried to deny it, a small part of me still wanted my parents to recognize me, still hoped that one day they'd see me for who I really was. So, graduation day came and went without much fuss from my family. My big moment was marked by a quick dinner at some chain restaurant. So, Ella, what's next? Dad asked, barely looking up from his menu. I sat up straight, trying to sound confident. I actually got a job offer, in one of the museums in New York. Dad frowned. I don't know, Ella. New York is expensive. How much does this job pay? I felt my face get hot as I mumbled the not-so-impressive starting salary. The disappointment on their faces was super obvious. The rest of the dinner was a blur of thinly veiled criticism and comparisons to Jack and Oliver's academic awesomeness. As we were leaving the restaurant, Grandma Elizabeth pulled me aside. Don't let them dim your light, my dear, she whispered, pressing a small envelope into my hand. Go to New York. Chase your dreams. Inside the envelope was a check, enough to cover my first month's rent in the city. I hugged her tight, trying not to cry. The next few years were crazy. I threw myself into my work, slowly but surely making a name for myself in the world of art restoration. It was during this time that I met Noah. Noah was a struggling graphic designer with a nice smile and this infectious passion for his work. We clicked right away over our shared love of art and our experiences as underdogs in our fields. After dating for a while, I decided it was time for Noah to meet my family. From the second we sat down, it was clear my parents had other ideas. They bombarded Noah with questions, each one more pointed than the last. So, Noah, Dad started, trying to sound casual but failing, what exactly are your long-term career prospects? Noah shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. Well, I'm building my client base. It takes time, but I'm making progress. Mom jumped in. And your current income? Is it enough to support a family? I felt my face get hot. Mom, that's not. It's okay, Ella, Noah said, squeezing my hand under the table. I'm not where I want to be money-wise yet, Dr. Thompson, but I'm working hard to get there. The interrogation kept going throughout dinner. With each question, I could see Noah's confidence taking a hit, and my own anger rising. As we were leaving, Mom pulled me aside. Ella, honey, I know you think you care for this boy, but you need to be realistic. You've already chosen a challenging career path. Don't make it worse by attaching yourself to someone with no real future. Mom, I hissed, shocked at how blunt she was being. Dad joined in. Your mother's right, Ella. You need to think about your future. This Noah seems nice enough, but is he really good enough for you? You could do so much better. I stood there, speechless, as years of pent-up frustration threatened to explode. How dare they judge Noah? How dare they once again dismiss my choices? So, as Noah and I started planning our wedding, reality hit us hard. Our combined savings were pretty pathetic, barely enough for a simple ceremony. One night, after staring at budget spreadsheets for hours, I decided to bring it up with my parents. Maybe they'd want to chip in. Mom, Dad, I started hesitantly during our weekly phone call. Noah and I have set a date for the wedding. We're trying to keep costs down, but I was wondering if maybe you'd like to help out a little? Even just with the planning? The silence on the other end of the line was so long and awkward. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice cold as ice. Ella, you're an adult now. If you've chosen to marry this person, then you need to handle the consequences yourself. I hung up feeling like crap, but not really surprised. Once again, Grandma Elizabeth swooped in to save the day. When I told her about the situation, she didn't hesitate to help. My dear, she said, her voice warm over the phone, I may not be able to give you the wedding of your dreams, but I want to help make your day special. She sent over some money that, while not a ton, made a huge difference to our plans. The wedding day arrived, and I had this mix of excitement and nerves churning in my stomach. The community center we'd rented was simple, but looked nice, decorated with wildflowers and twinkly lights. Our small group of friends had pitched in, helping with everything from the decorations to the homemade cake. As I walked down the makeshift aisle, Noah's face lit up with a smile that made all the struggle worth it. For a moment, I forgot about everything else, the money stress, my family being jerks, and just soaked in the love radiating from his eyes. The bubble burst as soon as I caught sight of my family. Mom and Dad sat stiffly in the front row, looking bored and disgusted. I overheard Mom muttering to Dad about the tacky decorations and cheap food. Jack and Oliver were even worse, snickering in the corner and constantly on their phones. I tried to ignore them, focusing instead on our vows and the supportive faces of our friends. It wasn't until the next day that I realized just how cruel they could be. I woke up to a ton of notifications on my phone. Jack and Oliver had gone on social media, posting a bunch of unflattering photos from the wedding. Congrats to our big sis on her special day, read one caption under a blurry photo of Noah and me cutting our homemade cake. Nothing says true love like a dollar store wedding. Another post showed a picture of the buffet table next to a photo of a fancy meal from some high-end restaurant. Ella's wedding versus our average Tuesday lunch. Guess which one's which? The comments section was a war zone. Some relatives were shocked at the brothers' behavior. This is completely unacceptable, you should be ashamed of yourselves, wrote Aunt Sarah. But others seemed to think it was funny. Savage but true. That wedding looked like a homeless convention, commented our cousin Tim. I felt sick reading through the comments. But what really broke my heart was seeing my parents' responses. Instead of telling their sons off, they were actually encouraging them. Mom had commented, "Boys will be boys. It's just a bit of harmless fun." I didn't call them and demand an apology. I just decided to forget about them for a while. So, 6 months after our wedding, it was time for the annual Thompson family reunion. Even though I was worried about it, Noah thought I should go, hoping it might be a chance to clear the air. Man, were we wrong. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I managed to keep it together for the first hour, making polite conversation and avoiding my immediate family as much as I could. But then I overheard Jack bragging about his latest fancy vacation, paid for by our parents, of course. Something inside me just snapped. "Must be nice," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "To have mommy and daddy bankroll your entire life." The room went dead quiet. Jack stared at me, his mouth hanging open. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means," I shot back, years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. "You and Oliver have been handed everything on a silver platter, while I've had to fight for every scrap of recognition or support." Mom stepped forward, her face red with anger. "Now, Ella, you're being ridiculous. We've always treated you children equally." I let out a bitter laugh. "Equally? Are you kidding me? Let's talk about equal, shall we?" I started counting off on my fingers. Private school tuition for the boys, public school for me. Brand new cars for their 16th birthdays, nothing for mine. And let's not forget the crowning achievement, $300,000 for their Ivy League medical educations, while I had to scrape by on scholarships and loans. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, all eyes on our family's dirty laundry being aired so publicly. Mom's voice was ice cold when she spoke. "If you're so obsessed with money, Ella, perhaps you should have married someone rich instead of your poor husband." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Noah, who had been silently supporting me, stiffened beside me. "How dare you?" I hissed, feeling tears in my eyes. "Noah is worth 10 of you. He actually loves me for who I am, not for how I can make him look good to his country club friends." The reunion turned into total chaos. Everyone was throwing accusations, bringing up old grudges, and years of resentment came pouring out. In the middle of all the shouting, a strong voice cut through the noise. "Enough." Everyone turned to see Grandma Elizabeth standing up, her usually kind face looking stern and angry. "I have watched this family tear itself apart for years, and I won't stand for it anymore," she declared. "Margaret, Robert, your treatment of Ella has been shameful. And you boys," she turned to Jack and Oliver, "your cruelty towards your sister is unforgivable." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Mom, never one to back down, spat out, "Mother, you don't understand. Ella has always been difficult, always causing problems." "No, Margaret," Grandma interrupted. "The only problem here is your blatant favoritism and inability to see the damage you've done." I looked around the room, at the shocked faces of my relatives, at my grandmother's resolute stance, at my parents' anger, and my brother's smug expressions. In that moment, something inside me broke and then came back together differently. "I'm done," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm done trying to win your approval, done trying to be part of this toxic family. Noah and I are leaving, and don't bother trying to contact us." The months that followed were tough. Noah was my rock through it all. He held me when the sadness hit, celebrated the small victories, and never once made me feel guilty for the family drama I'd brought into our lives. So, life has this weird way of throwing you for a loop when you least expect it. It all kicked off with a phone call. Noah had been working his butt off for weeks, putting everything he had into a pitch for this big-time client. When he answered the phone that sunny Tuesday morning, I could tell from the look on his face that something major had gone down. "We got it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ella, we got the contract." The next few months were crazy. Noah's little design firm blew up overnight, the fancy client opening doors we never thought we'd see. Suddenly, we weren't just scraping by, we were rolling in it. But with our new success came this unexpected complication. My phone started blowing up with notifications, friend requests from family members I'd long since blocked, messages from distant relatives suddenly wanting to catch up. And then, the call I'd been dreading. "Ella, sweetheart." My mother's voice, sickly sweet, came through the line. "We've heard the wonderful news about Noah's business. We always knew you two would make it." The bullshit kept coming. My father got on the line, talking about how proud they were, how they'd always believed in us. I listened in stunned silence, getting angrier with each lie. "We'd love to see you," Mom chirped. "Maybe we could all have dinner, celebrate your success as a family?" That snapped me out of it. "As a family?" I repeated, my voice hard. "We haven't been a family for a long time, and that's not going to change just because our bank account has." I stuck to my guns. When my parents showed up at our door out of the blue, I didn't let them in. When they sent fancy gifts, I sent them right back unopened. Instead, Noah and I focused on building the life we'd always wanted. We worked hard, saved smart, and eventually found ourselves signing the papers for a beautiful apartment right in the middle of the city. Excited to share our happiness, I posted a photo on social media. It was a simple shot, Noah and I, keys in hand, standing in front of our new home. Next to it was a picture from our most recent visit with Grandma Elizabeth, her proud smile beaming at the camera. "New beginnings and old love," I captioned it. Grateful for those who've been there through it all. New home, family. As I hit post, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. This was my family now, Noah, Grandma Elizabeth, and the friends who had stood by us through thick and thin. We had built this life for ourselves, despite the odds, despite all the people who said we couldn't do it. The soft evening light was coming through the windows of our new apartment as I was busy in the kitchen, getting dinner ready for Noah and Grandma Elizabeth. It was our first real family dinner in our new place, and I wanted everything to be just right. The sudden, aggressive pounding on the front door shattered that peace in an instant. "Ella, open up. We know you're in there." My blood ran cold. I'd know those voices anywhere, Jack and Oliver. Before I could even react, the door burst open. My brothers stormed in, their faces twisted with anger. I barely had time to see Noah jumping to his feet before Jack was in my face, jabbing an accusing finger at my chest. "You manipulative little bitch," he snarled. "We always knew you were playing the long game, but this? This is low, even for you." I stumbled back, shocked by how much venom was in his voice. "What are you talking about?" Oliver laughed, and it was a harsh, ugly sound. "Don't play dumb, Ella. We saw your little social media post. Showing off your new apartment, posing with Grandma. You think we can't put two and two together?" It hit me what they were thinking. "You think Grandma bought us this apartment?" "We know she did," Jack spat. "You've been playing the poor, neglected child for years, worming your way into her good graces. And now you've manipulated her into making you the sole heir." I felt a surge of anger, straightening my spine. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Noah and I bought this apartment ourselves. With our own money, that we earned." Oliver sneered, his eyes darting around the room. "Right, sure you did. Where is the old bat anyway? Hiding her away so we can't talk sense into her? That crazy old woman should be in a cemetery by now. I can't wait for her to kick the bucket so I can sell her house and live it up." The room fell deadly silent. For a moment, I thought I might have imagined those horrific words. Then, a quiet voice spoke from the doorway of the guest room. "So this is how you truly feel about me." All heads turned to see Grandma Elizabeth standing there, her face a mask of shock and disappointment. The color drained from Jack and Oliver's faces as they realized their grandmother had heard every word. "Grandma," Jack stammered, we didn't mean." Elizabeth held up a hand, shutting him up. "I've heard enough," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I finally understand who truly values me and who sees me as nothing more than a meal ticket." I found my voice, strengthened by my grandmother's presence. "I think you both need to leave. Now." For a moment, it looked like they might argue. But one look at Grandma's face, a mixture of hurt and resolve, seemed to deflate them. They slunk towards the door, muttering weak excuses. The aftermath of that crazy evening hit like a storm. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, constantly reminding me of the mess that had blown up. Mom's name popped up on the screen for what felt like the millionth time. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Ella," her voice was sharp, not sounding like a mom at all. "You need to fix this. Your grandmother is furious with the boys. You need to smooth things over, tell her it was all a misunderstanding." I let out a bitter laugh. "A misunderstanding?" "They broke into my home and said they couldn't wait for her to die so they could sell her house." "How exactly is that a misunderstanding?" "They didn't mean it," Dad chimed in, apparently on speakerphone. "You know how the boys can be. They were just upset." "Upset about what?" I challenged. "That Noah and I bought an apartment with our own money? That Grandma loves me?" Mom's voice turned sickly sweet. "Sweetheart, we know you've always felt left out. But you need to think about what's best for the family. Your brothers deserve that inheritance. Don't be selfish." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. "Selfish? You're calling me selfish? After years of favoritism, of dismissing my achievements, of treating Noah and me like second-class citizens? And now you have the audacity to demand I give up an inheritance I never even asked for?" "Now, Ella," Dad started, but I cut him off. "No. I'm done. I'm done with the manipulation, the guilt trips, all of it. Don't call me again. Don't text. Don't show up at my door. We're through." Over the next few days, I blocked their numbers, along with Jack and Oliver's. It was painful, like cutting off a diseased limb, but necessary for healing to begin. As the dust settled, I found myself surrounded by a different kind of warmth. Grandma Elizabeth, now fully aware of the family dynamics she had long suspected, became an even more constant presence in our lives. Aunt Sarah, who had reached out after the wedding fiasco, became a regular visitor. "I always knew you were special, Ella," she said, hugging me tightly. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner." Other relatives, cousins, and distant aunts and uncles who had witnessed my family's mistreatment over the years, reached out with messages of support. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing genuine relationships to flourish where there had once been only obligation. Noah's family, bless them, wrapped me in a blanket of unconditional love. His parents, who had watched from the sidelines as my own family tore me down, went out of their way to make me feel cherished. Noah and I threw ourselves into making our new apartment a home. Each piece of furniture, each photo on the wall, was a testament to the life we were building together, a life founded on mutual respect, support, and love.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself. This could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.